Yeah, my name is Hussein Askary. I am a member of the Schiller Institute and Executive Intelligence Review, which is organizing this seminar. I came back from Egypt 2 days ago from a one-week visit there to launch the Arabic translation of the E.I.R. special report, The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. I personally and other people, we decided that Egypt should be the place from which to launch the Arabic translation of this massive global development idea because of the importance of Egypt. Egypt has it's the most important Arab country, but it's also one of the important countries in Africa. And the idea of the report and joining the New Silk Road was actually highly welcomed by the highest levels of the Egyptian government. I can show you some because they realize now that this is the only solution for the deep economic crisis in Egypt, but also in the whole Southwest Asia, so-called Middle East, and Africa, by joining forces with China, the BRICS countries, to develop their countries internally and utilize the connection to the world economy and the development dynamic which was launched by China with the idea of the New Silk Road. Now, Helga mentioned the Saudi bombardment of Yemen today. Today, at this moment, there is a similar seminar in the capital of Yemen, in Sana'a, by a group of Yemeni experts and patriots to launch also the Arabic. They printed the Arabic version, and the seminar is headed by one of the best modern Yemeni poets, Abdul Aziz al-Muqalih, and it's organized by our friend Fuad al-Ghaffari. Right under the Saudi bombardment, they established a committee for coordination with the BRICS, and now they are promoting the idea of the New Silk Road and how Yemen will benefit from this, right under Saudi bombardment, actually. Anyway, so I can take the next one. These are some of the ideas which I've presented in Egypt for people there. The launching was sponsored by the Egyptian Transport Ministry, with the presence of the Minister of Transport, Said al-Gayoushi himself. But I was telling people, our idea is not to build the New Silk Road. We presented the idea of the New Silk Road 25 years ago, as Helga said, and China adopted it as its policy. Our idea is to go from the New Silk Road to the World Land Bridge, where we connect Africa and the Americas to the Eurasian land bridge. So that's the concept. And in the red, lines is where we have the deficit in infrastructure and deficit in development. So this is what is missing in the world, in the global map, but it also, a lot is missing in the Americas, of course, even in North America and in Europe right now. But this is the new concept. It's not simply the New Silk Road, it's the World Land Bridge. We can unite all nations of the world around the one concept of economic development and cooperation. Yeah. So I had the honor to be in the Schiller Institute and the E.I.R. in 1996 when the first Eurasian land bridge, New Silk Road, I worked with Helga and others. I was still a young man. But the idea, is a complete transformation. The reason I joined the Schiller Institute in 1994 is I was living in Norway, and the Schiller Institute came to Oslo, where Arafat and Rabin and Perez were meeting. And the Schiller Institute people said, look, if you don't develop the economy of the Palestinians, the Jordanians, the Syrians, the Lebanese, and the Israelis, there will be no peace. And I immediately joined. Because that's the right concept, because we have problems in Middle East and Africa where people say the problem is the regime. If we get rid of the regime, everything will become good. So we need to change the policy, and then the economy will solve itself. But that's a complete lie. So this is what Europe and the United States are pushing. So the concept now, even in Egypt, is people completely get the idea that the question of this New Silk Road is not trade. It's not moving goods from A to B. The idea is to build development corridor to develop all the areas between A and B. That's the concept. And this is the idea of the development corridor. All these lines should be 100, 150 kilometers wide with transport energy, electricity, oil and gas, water, and building new agricultural and industrial centers. Mr. Lyndon LaRouche in 2002 was in Abu Dhabi in a conference about oil and gas. And there were 4 oil ministers. This is the oil minister of United Arab Emirates. And Mr. LaRouche shocked everybody by saying the Gulf countries should gradually stop exporting raw oil. Should use the oil as an industrial material for petrochemicals, chemicals, plastics and everything, where the value of 1 barrel of oil transformed into an industrial product would be many, many, many times higher than selling it as raw oil or burning it. And Mr. LaRouche said, you should utilize your position as a crossroads of the world. And this is exactly the point which we are trying to promote in Southwest Asia, is that we should, this is a unique area. There's no place on earth which has the unique characteristics of the region in the zone. It's in between 3 continents. It has more than 2/3 of the world oil and gas reserves, but more importantly, it has more than 450 million people. Most of them are under the age of 30. So you have the whole future in front of them. They also have natural resources, but also these are all nations with very, very ancient cultures. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Iraq, Syria. These are people who have a very clear idea of their culture and their civilization, and they know that scientific development, cultural development is the way forward. But the region has been, all the advantages of this region has been turned into disadvantages because it has become the center of global conflict and proxy wars. Even in this region, which in the Arabic report, we propose the establishment of an Arab infrastructure investment bank, where the nations of the region, in the Gulf countries, not only there's oil, there's the sovereign funds of the Gulf countries are about $2.5 to $3 trillion. These countries have in funds, in hard currency, but it's being used in financial markets, real estate markets, in London, in Switzerland, in New York, and so on and so forth. But they should establish a joint development bank like the Chinese did with the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. So this region has unique capabilities of very quickly being economically transformed, but should utilize the idea of the new Silk Road. Can go further. Helga referred to the visit by President Xi Jinping in January to Egypt, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Iran and Saudi Arabia were about to enter into a real war, actually, at the moment. And the Chinese intervened with the idea of the new Silk Road. And, this was not a warning, but they said, what the hell are you doing? You are going to destroy the world economy. This is not the way to do things with this crazy religious conflicts. You should work together. We will help you to build your countries, but also help you to work together for development. So this made, like in Egypt, the idea of the Silk Road, everybody was saying, oh, the Silk Road will compete with the Suez Canal traffic, like so many, many years. Therefore, the idea of the new Silk Road was completely blacked out in the Egyptian political and media circles. But now, President Xi Jinping brought back the idea of the new Silk Road as actually beneficial for Egypt, which we can explain quickly. Now, we have in the report, in the Arabic version of the report, we have the plan for the reconstruction of Syria. As I said, Helga said, there will be no peace. There will be no end for terrorism. There will be no end for political oppression unless we develop this region. And therefore, Syria, ironically, could be the perfect place to start to establish, to practice the new economic ideas which we have designed in this report, utilizing Syria's position as a crossroads between Africa, Europe, and Asia, but also being a nation which is just coming out of war. They actually have no obligation to listen either to the IMF, the World Bank, the EU, the US, or anybody. They can establish their own development bank and issue their own credit. They are not obliged to pay any debt at the moment. And this puts Syria in a perfect position to start to launch a completely new economic policy. And from Syria, you can actually project that idea into many other nations. When you succeed many other nations will do it. So we're not going to go through too much details because it's short on time. But in Egypt, we have also the Egyptian model could become a model because Egypt is a very important nation. And with the President al-Sisi coming to power, Egypt has transformed its identity of itself and what it should do to solve 30 years of accumulation of economic and social problems. But they are in a conflict to do small solutions here and there or go for the big change. And I think the Egyptian presidency and leadership, as I have understood it, they are going for the big change, not to solve small projects here and there, NGOs, EU donations, so on and so forth. So the idea is they will focus on mega projects like the new Suez Canal, which they built in 1 year instead of 8 years. They will go for new agro-industrial zones in the desert, reclaiming the desert of Egypt. For demographic expansion, they will use high technology. Now they have an agreement to build nuclear power plant with Russia, which will start the first nuclear power plant, but also high-speed railway and so on. So they will not start from zero. They will start from where China and other nations have reached and utilize that technology rather than starting from scratch. And the idea of internal financing. The new Suez Canal was built by the Egyptian people, mobilized by their government to internally raise the money, $8 billion, to finish the project in 1 year. The same way Ethiopia is doing with this dam project, the Millennium Dam and other development projects, which is the correct idea. But there is a conflict on how to proceed with the other projects, whether it will be done by Egyptian financing or we should need foreign investment or loans from the IMF and World Bank. So there's still a conflict inside Egypt which way to go. But they have the right idea. And of course, utilizing Egypt's position between Asia, the Arab world, and Africa is actually now on the agenda, especially after my visit. So this is a disastrous demographic map of Egypt. 90 million people, 95% of the people live on only 5% of the land. And 95% of the land is empty. And the United States spent billions of dollars to reduce the population of Egypt by family planning programs, by this and that. But there was no idea to open new areas for the population to live in. They said the solution is to reduce the people of Egypt. And this is what the IMF and World Bank and the EU and the United States were pushing billions and billions of dollars to do, rather than building new development projects. But the Egyptians have a different idea. These are some of the main projects they are having, like the new Suez Canal, and they are building an industrial zone around the Suez Canal and using it as a development corridor for all Sinai, but also the eastern part, east of Cairo, of Egypt. Have new industries. We added to the concept, which now the Egyptian transport minister himself said, we're going to do the extension to Africa, we're going to do extension North Africa, and we will have to think now about connecting to the Arabian Peninsula. And also develop the areas, on these lines. So you go next. This is an idea which is presented by Egyptian scientist Dr. Farouk al-Baz, who worked in NASA, to build a parallel line to the Nile and move the concentration of the population from the Nile Valley to the new Nile Valley by building railways and roads and connecting them to the major cities. I added the green zones where the Egyptian government is intending to reclaim 4 million hectares of land and give it to young people and companies to settle there. They build houses for them, they build the infrastructure, and they give them a loan for the first 3 years so they can grow food and other small industries. So the development corridor should be a bit further into the desert so you can transform the demographics and the economic situation in Egypt. Go to the next. And then comes the idea of the connecting Egypt to Africa. There are projects which have been on the drawing board since the 1970s, in the Lagos plan, for example, but nobody did anything to build them. So now the Egyptian government and the South African government are intending that from south and north to support the idea of connecting all East Africa from north to south, the Cairo-Cape Town Railway. Now this is being considered actively. To, of course, intersects Ethiopia, Sudan, the landlocked countries in Kenya, is not landlocked, but Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Eastern Congo, and so on. All these nations could be connected to new transport to find outlets into international markets. To go further. Then the Nile River and the other rivers in Africa could be connected together to have a river transport corridor from the north to the south, like the Rhine, Main, Danube, are connected now, and you can have transportation from East Europe and North and Western Europe. So the concept is the same. You go further. We have our friend, an engineer in Egypt, have developed also the concept of building the Africa Pass, he calls it, which goes close to the Libyan border, but it's complete desert today. But there are enormous water resources there, there's fertile land, and there is no reason why that part of Egypt is not being developed. And then to build outlets for the nations in the Great Lake region, for both for exports but also for imports of goods and technologies, and open up that whole region for development. There's also the idea to connect from east to west, from the port Sudan in Sudan, or Djibouti, the old idea, Djibouti, to Dakar in Senegal, to connect all this Saharan, the Sahel region with modern infrastructure. This is ideas supported by the Organization of Islamic Conference, but no financing has been forwarded to it. Now China comes into the picture and transforms the situation. Say, okay, this is an enormous economic development potential. It's rich with raw materials. It has also large populations, agricultural, every aspect. You can develop that region, but it lacks infrastructure. So the Chinese have offered to build these transport corridors from the ports on Mombasa and Lamu on the Indian Ocean, and open up all these landlocked countries, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Congo, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. And these nations, the only thing they need is to develop infrastructure and educate the labor force. I mean, the Chinese are even training the Ugandan army to turn it into an army corps of engineers. So instead of beating the people or shooting the people, they can build the railways. And then we have the Transaqua project, but I will not go through it so much, but Dr. Vicky is the person who talked, but this is a kind of concept. I was presenting this in Egypt to say the time of mega projects is back. The Chinese have proven it. You can build these massive, massive, major infrastructure and development projects which have been undermined by the West, saying that these mega projects are romantic ideas. A military dictator wants to become famous in history, he will build a huge football stadium and call it President So Stadium. But they use the same thing with mega projects. But mega projects are back now on the map, and all these have potential to be implemented. This is the idea to save Lake Chad. And then Africa could be transformed from the colonial system to the modern sovereign community of sovereign nations system. You can go further. So this is just to give you a report. This is the Minister of Transportation of Egypt, Dr. Saad al-Ghiyoushi. He personally said, I have to present this, this report to the Egyptian people, but he also announced for the first time in this press conference that Egypt is intending to invest 1 trillion Egyptian pounds, which is about $100 billion in the next 14 years on roads and railway and logistic centers. He also announced that Egypt is discussing with other nations in Africa building a 50,000 kilometer network of roads and railways, which is under negotiation. This was information coming out for the first time. But he said, you know, our intention is to integrate Egypt's vision. They have a plan for 2030. We will integrate our internal development with the idea of the new Silk Road. So there's a clear intentions. Then we were invited to the Suez Canal Authority. This is Admiral Mohab Mamish. He is the man who, he's a military general in the Marine. He's a close friend of President Al-Sisi. And he was the general who made sure that the new Suez Canal is dug in just 1 year, as the president had given orders, to prove to the world that Egyptians can do these massive projects. They can raise the money for them, they can build them. Of course, they got technical help from other countries, but that's their concept is that Egypt can do these things, but they need support. We were also taken on a boat trip in the new Suez Canal. The idea is that they welcome this idea very, very much. It's not like the first time they hear about it, but the first time they hear and see a concept which they themselves had in the mind, but they never believed that it could become a reality on a global scale. So when we present the idea of the new Silk Road, what the Chinese are doing, what the BRICS nations are doing, and what the Egyptians themselves can do, then the whole situation is transformed. I mean, we had 4 or 5 seminars. We had seminars every day and TV events, but the gentleman there is the former Prime Minister of Egypt, Sam Sharaf. He said, I was just in China, and I'm very, very happy to see this idea here in Egypt. He was surprised. And he said, this is the right way for Egypt to go. We have to study this and implement this, because we have for many years, 30 years, have not done enough for the development of Egypt, but it's a new, also we had other seminars, but I think I should stop here. So thank you very much.